Forever 21 did not begin as a billion-dollar fashion empire. It began as a gamble. In 1984, Do Chang and his wife, Jin Suk, Chang arrived in the United States with little money, limited English, and a single belief that America was a land where hard work could change your destiny. Like many immigrants, they took whatever jobs they could find. Do Chang worked as a janitor, pumped gas at a station, and brewed coffee in a small cafe. Every job taught him something new about American consumers, their habits, and most importantly, how money flowed. While working these jobs, Chang noticed something unusual. The people driving the nicest cars and living the most comfortable lives weren't tea doctors or engineers. They were small business owners. Many of them were involved in retail, particularly clothing. He realized that fashion wasn't just about creativity. It was about speed, volume, and understanding what people wanted before they even asked for it. At the time, fashion trends were controlled by luxury brands and department stores. Runway styles took months or even years to trickle down to the average shopper. Clothes were expensive, seasonal, and slow to change. Chang saw an opportunity hidden in that delay. What if trendy clothes could be sold quickly, cheaply, and constantly refreshed? With borrowed money and enormous risk, the Changs opened their first store in Los Angeles. They named it Fashion 21, later changing it to Forever 21 to reflect youth, energy, and the idea that fashion, and youth itself, could last forever. The store was small, crowded, and far from glamorous. But it had one powerful advantage. It was fast. Instead of designing original collections months in advance, Forever 21 focused on copying current trends and producing them at lightning speed. If a style became popular on the streets or on TV, Forever 21 could have a version of it on shelves within weeks. Prices were shockingly low. Teenagers and young adults who couldn't afford designer brands suddenly had access to trendy clothing that felt current and exciting. The formula worked almost instantly. In its first year, the store made more than $700,000 in sales. An enormous success for a new immigrant-owned business. That success gave the Changs confidence, and confidence quickly turned into ambition. They began opening more stores across California, then across the United States. Shopping malls became their playground. While traditional retailers preferred moderate-sized stores, Forever 21 went in the opposite direction. Their locations were massive, often replacing old department stores. The idea was simple: overwhelm customers with choice. Bright lights, loud music, endless racks of clothing. Shopping at Forever 21 felt energetic, chaotic, and addictive. This strategy was intentional. Psychologically, customers felt like they were discovering hidden treasures. Clothes were cheap enough that buyers didn't overthink their purchases. If something didn't last long, it didn't matter. It was replaced by something new the next week. Forever 21 trained customers to buy now, not later. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the brand exploded. Teenagers, college students, and young professionals flocked to Forever 21 stores. It wasn't just a clothing store anymore, it was a cultural phenomenon. The brand tapped into youth culture at exactly the right moment, when malls were social hubs and fast fashion was becoming a lifestyle. Unlike competitors, Forever 21 reinvested nearly all of its profits back into expansion. Store after store opened at a breathtaking pace. While other brands hesitated, Forever 21 moved aggressively, securing prime mall locations before rivals could react. Their massive stores became landmarks, sometimes the largest tenant in the entire mall. At its peak, Forever 21 operated over 800 stores worldwide, spanning the United States, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. The company generated more than $4 billion in annual revenue, making it one of the most powerful fast fashion brands on the planet. All of this was achieved without outside investors, without going public, and without surrendering control. That control remained firmly within the Chang family. This was unusual. Most companies of this size rely on boards of directors, shareholder oversight, and professional executives. Forever 21 did not. Do Chang and Jin Suk Chang ran the company their way. Decisions were centralized. Loyalty was valued over expertise. Family members were placed in key roles. To outsiders, the business felt secretive, almost mysterious, but during the rise, that secrecy seemed like strength. The Changs were praised as visionary entrepreneurs who built an empire from nothing. Their story became an inspiration, proof that immigrants could conquer American business through determination and risk-taking. Yet even during its golden years, warning signs were quietly forming. Forever 21 relied heavily on physical retail at a time when online shopping was beginning to reshape the industry, while competitors experimented with data analytics, inventory optimization, and digital platforms. Forever 21 remained focused on what had always worked: more stores, bigger stores, louder stores. The company's supply chain was fast, but chaotic. Clothes were produced quickly and cheaply, often leading to quality complaints. Environmental and labor concerns began to surface, though they were largely ignored during the boom years. Profit mattered more than sustainability. Speed mattered more than planning. Still, as long as customers kept coming, none of this seemed urgent. By the mid-2000s, Forever 21 wasn't just surviving, it was dominating. Malls depended on it for foot traffic. Young shoppers depended on it for affordability. Fashion trends depended on it for mass adoption. The brand had become too big to fail, or so it seemed. But success has a hidden danger. The systems that build an empire are not always the systems that sustain it. Forever 21 had mastered growth, but it had never learned restraint. It knew how to expand, but not how to evolve. And most importantly, it had placed absolute power in the hands of a family that believed their instincts alone were enough. The very qualities that created Forever 21's rise, speed, control, and relentless expansion, were quietly setting the stage for its downfall. Because in fashion, trends don't just change on the racks. They change in technology, in culture, and in consumer behavior. And Forever 21 was about to face a world it was not prepared for. At the height of its power, Forever 21 looked invincible. Sales were in the billions, stores were packed, and the brand name was synonymous with affordable fashion. To the outside world, it appeared that the company had cracked the code of retail. But inside the empire, problems were quietly stacking up. Problems that were ignored because success had become blinding. One of the first and biggest mistakes Forever 21 made was believing that what worked in the past would work forever. The company's entire strategy revolved around physical stores, especially massive mall locations. While other retailers began downsizing and experimenting with flexible layouts, Forever 21 doubled down on size. If a 20,000 square foot store worked, a 40,000 square foot store must be even better. In some locations, Forever 21 stores grew to over 100,000 square feet, rivaling old department stores. These massive locations came with massive costs. Rent in prime malls was expensive, and long-term leases locked the company into payments that couldn't easily be escaped. During good times, this didn't matter. Sales were high, and foot traffic was constant. But retail is cyclical, and Forever 21 had built a business that could only survive if growth never slowed. At the same time, the retail world was changing faster than Forever 21 realized. Online shopping was no longer a side option. It was becoming the primary way young consumers discovered and bought fashion. Brands like Zara and H&M invested heavily in data, logistics, and omnichannel retail. They tracked customer behavior, optimized inventory, and adjusted production based on real-time demand. Forever 21 did not. The company was late to e-commerce, and when it finally invested, it did so without a clear strategy. The website was clunky, inventory was poorly managed, and online operations were treated as secondary to physical stores. Leadership believed that customers would always prefer the in-store experience, the loud music, the crowded racks, the thrill of discovery. What they failed to see was that convenience was becoming more valuable than chaos. As online-first brands emerged, Forever 21's weaknesses became more obvious. New competitors didn't need massive stores or expensive leases. They could launch trends directly on social media and ship products straight to consumers. Their costs were lower, their feedback loops faster, and their risks smaller. Forever 21, by contrast, was trapped inside its own footprint. Internally, the company's decision-making structure made adaptation almost impossible. Forever 21 was still run like a family business, even though it had grown into a global corporation. Du Wanchang maintained tight control over major decisions. Professional executives and consultants were often brought in, but their advice was frequently ignored. Data took a back seat to instinct. Family members held powerful positions, and loyalty was valued more than expertise. This created an environment where challenging leadership was risky. Executives who questioned expansion plans or raised concerns about costs often found themselves sidelined. The company did not have a culture of debate. It had a culture of obedience. One of the most damaging consequences of this structure was the refusal to slow down. Even as mall traffic declined and consumer habits shifted, Forever 21 continued opening stores. Expansion became a habit, almost an addiction. Closing stores felt like admitting failure, and failure was not an option in a company built on pride and control. The financial strain grew heavier each year. Inventory piled up as trends moved faster than the company could respond. Unsold clothing filled warehouses and store back rooms, tying up cash and forcing heavy discounts. Margins shrank, but leadership pushed forward, convinced that the next season would fix everything. At the same time, Forever 21 faced mounting criticism over labor practices and sustainability. Reports emerged accusing the company of exploiting garment workers and relying on unsafe factories. Lawsuits and investigations followed, damaging the brand's image among younger consumers who increasingly cared about ethics and transparency. Instead of confronting these concerns head-on, the company largely dismissed them, seeing criticism as a distraction rather than a warning. Another major issue was the company's refusal to bring in outside investors or go public. While this allowed the Chung family to maintain complete control, it also limited access to capital and accountability. Public companies are forced to answer to shareholders and regulators. Forever 21 answered only to itself. This isolation created blind spots. Without external pressure, there was little incentive to modernize systems, improve data analysis, or rethink strategy. Decisions were made behind closed doors, often based on intuition rather than evidence. What once felt agile now felt outdated. By the mid-2010s, the warning signs were impossible to ignore. Sales began to decline. Mall traffic dropped sharply, especially among younger shoppers. Online competitors grew rapidly, capturing attention on Instagram and YouTube, platforms Forever 21 had failed to master. Yet instead of retreating, the company pushed harder, expanding internationally into unfamiliar markets with high risk and low margins. International expansion proved costly. Cultural differences, supply chain challenges, and weak brand loyalty overseas led to underperforming stores. Losses mounted, but leases remained locked in. Every underperforming store became an anchor, pulling the entire company downward. Internally, fear replaced confidence. Employees sensed instability, but leadership maintained a public image of strength. Problems were downplayed, store closures were delayed, hard decisions were avoided. Forever 21 was trapped by its own past success, unable to imagine a smaller, leaner version of itself. Perhaps the most tragic element of Forever 21's decline was that it wasn't inevitable. The brand still had recognition, loyal customers, and enormous resources. But survival required humility, the willingness to accept that the world had changed. That humility never came. The Cheng family had built Forever 21 from nothing, and that achievement shaped how they saw the company. To them, outside advice felt unnecessary. Data felt impersonal. Slowing down felt like weakness. They trusted the instincts that had made them billionaires, even as those instincts became outdated. By the late 2010s, the company was drowning in debt, burdened by oversized stores, outdated systems, and a shrinking customer base. What once looked like unstoppable growth now looked like reckless overreach. The cracks in the empire had turned into fractures. Forever 21 was no longer racing ahead of the fashion industry. It was being dragged behind it.